She had waited for this moment for so long that it almost felt unreal now that it was finally here. Standing behind the heavy curtain, she could hear the low hum of the crowd settling into their seats, the shuffling of programs, the occasional cough, and the subtle tapping of instruments being tuned. The smell of polished wood, brass, and faint perfume filled the air. Her fingers tingled as she clutched the edges of her music folder, though she knew she wouldn't need it entirely. Years of practice had drilled every note, every pause, and every nuance into her memory. But the pressure of performing on such a big stage made her stomach twist into knots. It wasn't just any stage. This was the most important performance of her life so far. The auditorium was packed with people who had dedicated their lives to music. Judges who were known for their strict critiques, and an audience that expected nothing less than perfection. She had performed in recitals before, small venues, school halls, but this was different. This was the big league. And while she had confidence in her skills, there was still that nagging little voice inside her head whispering, "What if something goes wrong?" She took a deep breath and tried to calm her racing heart. The soft hum of the audience outside the curtain mingled with the echo of her own thoughts. She could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on her, and it was dizzying. She reminded herself of the countless hours she had spent practicing alone in her room. Of the mornings she had woken before dawn to perfect a difficult passage. Of the evenings when she had stayed late in the music school just to get the timing right. This was what all of that preparation had led to. She couldn't afford to let fear win now. The performers before her had finished, each one receiving polite applause, some even enthusiastic, but none had left a lasting impression. She wondered if that worked in her favor. Maybe the audience's attention would be more focused on her. Maybe they would notice every detail, every subtle touch of emotion she could put into the music. She clenched her fists, letting the excitement mingle with her nerves. There was a fire inside her, a determination that was stronger than any fear. Backstage was a whirlwind of movement. Musicians adjusted their instruments, stagehands moved chairs and music stands, and the occasional stage manager hurried past with a clipboard. She tried to stay focused, finding a quiet corner to take a few more deep breaths. She repeated the opening bars of her solo silently in her mind, feeling each note, imagining the sound, letting her memory guide her fingers. The music was like an old friend, familiar and comforting. But the reality of performing it in front of hundreds of people, all of whom were listening for even the slightest mistake, was daunting. She glanced at the clock on the wall and realized it was almost time. Her name would be called any minute now. She swallowed hard, trying to calm the lump of anxiety in her throat. She reminded herself that she had done this before, in smaller settings, in front of friends, teachers, and family. Each time she had felt nervous, but she had always managed to pull through. She could do it again. She had to. Then she heard it. Her name clear and confident over the speakers. The announcement echoed through the auditorium. She took a final deep breath, lifted her head high, and stepped toward the curtain. The roar of the audience hit her suddenly as the curtain pulled back. Light blinded her for a moment, and the size of the stage seemed even larger than she remembered. Rows of seats stretched endlessly in front of her, filled with expectant faces. She felt the heat of the spotlight, but she refused to let it intimidate her. This was her moment. As she walked toward the piano, each step felt both heavy and exhilarating. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. But she focused on the keys, on the music that lived in her mind and heart. She reached the piano, gently rested her hands on the keys, and closed her eyes for a brief second. The audience was silent, waiting. She could feel their eyes on her, judging, expecting, anticipating. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Not really. She allowed herself a small smile, a signal that she was ready. A signal that she belonged here. She opened her eyes and looked down at the keys. They seemed ordinary, yet magical, ready to tell the story she had carried inside her for years. She began to play, softly at first, letting the melody unfurl like a ribbon in the air. Each note was precise, each pause intentional. She lost herself in the music, letting the audience fade into the background. She felt the music guide her fingers, her body, even her emotions. For a few minutes, she was not nervous, not anxious, not doubtful. She was simply playing, simply being, and the world outside that piano vanished. The first few bars passed perfectly. She could hear the faint rustle of the audience shifting in their seats, perhaps already impressed, perhaps already captivated. She felt a spark of confidence. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she could give them a performance they would remember. But even as that thought passed, a shadow of doubt crept back in. What if something went wrong? What if she forgot a note, lost the rhythm, or hit a wrong key? The fear was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. She shook her head slightly, as if to dispel the thought. She had trained herself for this, prepared for it in every conceivable way. She could do this. She had to. Every ounce of practice, every sacrifice, every sleepless night had led her to this moment. And she wouldn't let it slip away because of a fleeting moment of fear. She continued playing, each note flowing more naturally than the last. The melody was coming alive under her hands, telling a story that words could never capture. Her fingers danced over the keys, her heart syncing with the rhythm, her mind entirely focused. She could feel the energy in the auditorium, the tension, the anticipation. But instead of being intimidated, she let it fuel her. Every sound, every vibration from the piano seemed to travel through her, igniting her confidence. She glanced briefly at the audience and saw some faces leaning forward, eyes wide, mouths slightly open, captivated by the music. That tiny glimpse of connection gave her a boost she hadn't expected. She smiled to herself, realizing that this was what she had been waiting for. Not just to perform, but to connect, to touch people with her music. The fear was still there, yes, but it was now accompanied by exhilaration, joy, and determination. She was ready to give them everything she had. Then, just as she was settling into the rhythm of her performance, a small disaster struck. Something she hadn't anticipated, but she didn't know it yet. The next moment would test her courage, her preparation, and her ability to stay calm under pressure. For now, though, she was playing beautifully, completely immersed in the music, blissfully unaware of the challenge that lay ahead. The solo had begun, and she was determined to make it unforgettable. No matter what happened next, she had just settled into the flow of the music, her fingers moving with confidence, the melody rising and falling gracefully. Each note felt like a step along a familiar path, every chord resonating with her own heartbeat. The audience was silent, hanging on every sound. It was exactly the moment she had imagined 1,000 times during her practice sessions. Everything seemed perfect until it wasn't. In the blink of an eye, her sheet music, she had placed carefully on the piano stand, slipped and fell to the floor. A soft thud echoed faintly across the stage. She didn't notice it at first. Her focus was on the music. But then she glanced at the stand and panic surged through her. For a split second, her mind went blank. The music she had practiced so many times felt distant, as if it were floating somewhere out of reach. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. She could feel the tension in the auditorium shift. A subtle murmur of surprise running through the crowd. People assumed something had gone wrong. Some even whispered or chuckled quietly, thinking the solo was about to collapse. The judges leaned forward, eyebrows raised, waiting to see how she would respond. The pressure hit her like a wave, threatening to pull her under. Her heart pounded so loudly it felt as if it were competing with the music itself. She could almost hear herself thinking, what if I can't remember it? What if all this practice is wasted? A cold sweat broke out on her palms, and for a moment she doubted whether she could continue. She had always been able to rely on the sheet music, especially for the more complicated sections. The idea that it was gone was terrifying, but she had no choice. She couldn't stop, couldn't freeze, and couldn't let the audience see fear dominate her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the surge of panic inside her. Closing her eyes for a brief moment, she let herself remember. The solo wasn't just something on paper, it lived in her mind and in her hands. Every note, every pause, every dynamic had been practiced until it became second nature. She had visualized this performance countless times. She recalled the beginning of the solo, the gentle opening notes that set the tone. Her fingers slowly found the keys again, guided by muscle memory and instinct. The first note she played was soft, almost hesitant, but it was correct. Relief washed over her, and she continued cautiously, letting the music carry her forward. The audience watched in silence, many unaware of the small disaster that had just occurred. Those who did notice assumed she was struggling. They whispered among themselves, thinking the solo might be ruined. But she refused to let panic take over. She focused on the sound beneath her fingers, the way each note should feel, the emotion behind every chord. The music was still alive, and she was determined to let it speak. Slowly, the tension in her shoulders eased, replaced by concentration and determination. She had a choice. Let fear control her, or rise above it. Her fingers moved with more confidence now, each note connecting naturally to the next. She remembered the middle section, the part she had dreaded during practice because of its complexity. She could visualize the pattern, remember the timing, feel the rhythm. Her hands danced over the keys, fluid and sure, almost as if the music was writing itself through her. For the audience, it appeared as if nothing had gone wrong. Only she knew the small panic she had just overcome. She drew strength from the realization that she was capable of handling this. She could recover. She could shine even when the odds were stacked against her, as she continued. The subtle imperfections in her memory were smoothed over by intuition. She had played this solo so many times that her hands seemed to remember the notes even when her conscious mind faltered. Every accident she had feared became an opportunity for improvisation. She added slight flourishes where she had once been uncertain, shaping the music in a way that made it even more expressive. Her heart steadied, her breathing normalized. And for the first time since the sheet music fell, she felt in complete control. The solo was no longer a fragile performance, teetering on the edge. It was a statement of her skill, resilience, and courage. The audience began to notice. The whispers of doubt were replaced by murmurs of awe. People leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the precision and emotion in her playing. Even the judges, who had initially raised their eyebrows at the mishap, now watched intently, impressed by her composure. She could feel the energy in the room shifting, as if the music itself was commanding attention. Each crescendo, each pause, each delicate note carried weight and meaning. The story within the solo emerged more vividly than ever. She became fully immersed. Forgetting the panic that had gripped her just moments ago, her mind was sharp, her senses heightened. She was not just playing the music, she was living it. She could hear the resonance of the piano, and the way the sound traveled across the auditorium, reaching every corner of the room. She could feel the subtle vibrations through the floor, the bench beneath her, the connection between herself and the instrument. The sheet music was gone, but it was no longer necessary. Her preparation, her dedication, and her love for the music carried her forward. She realized something important. She didn't need the paper to perform beautifully. She needed herself. By the time she reached the more challenging passages, she was completely in control. Her fingers flew over the keys with speed and precision, yet there was grace in every movement. She added emotional depth to each phrase, bending the music slightly to reflect her own interpretation. The audience was mesmerized. They couldn't know how close she had come to losing the solo entirely, but they could feel the passion and confidence radiating from her performance. The atmosphere in the auditorium became electric. Tension transformed into admiration. She glanced briefly at the judges, who now had expressions of amazement. Their earlier doubts and surprise had turned into respect. She could see them nodding subtly, acknowledging the skill, memory, and courage it took to continue flawlessly after such an interruption. She felt a surge of pride, not just for playing correctly, but for having the courage to keep going when fear threatened to take over. This was more than a performance. It was a testament to her dedication and resilience. The solo moved toward its climax. Every note built upon the last, weaving a tapestry of sound that filled the auditorium. The music carried emotion, tension, relief, and beauty. She was fully in the moment, aware of the audience, yet unshaken by their gaze. She could feel the connection growing, the audience responding subtly with quiet gasps. Leaning forward, and the occasional whispered appreciation. The performance that had nearly crumbled under a small mishap had transformed into something alive, dynamic and deeply affecting. She reached the final section, her confidence unshakable now. The notes flowed effortlessly, her fingers hitting each key precisely. The energy in the room was palpable. The audience was silent, completely absorbed, as if holding their breath to capture every sound. She felt exhilaration mixed with relief. She had turned a potential disaster into a moment of triumph. She smiled slightly as she played the final chords, a delicate flourish ending the solo on a note of perfection. The last sound lingered, echoing softly across the hall. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then the auditorium erupted with applause, cheers, and whistles. The audience rose to their feet, captivated not just by the technical mastery, but by the courage and composure she had shown. The judges, too, clapped enthusiastically, some even standing, clearly impressed. Backstage, fellow performers whispered in admiration, astonished by how she had handled the challenge. The solo, which had begun with a small crisis, had become an unforgettable performance. She had shocked the audience, not just with her talent, but with her resilience and determination. The music had carried her through, and she had emerged stronger, more confident, and completely triumphant. The applause was still ringing in her ears, and she felt a warmth of satisfaction, but she knew she couldn't let herself relax completely. There was still more to come in the solo, and she had to maintain focus. Every note, every pause, every breath mattered. She took a deep breath, feeling the resonance of the final chord still vibrating through her fingers. The audience was watching, waiting for her to continue. And she knew this was the moment to show not just technical skill but emotional depth. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second and let herself visualize the next section of the solo. It was intricate, filled with fast passages and complex harmonies that could trip even the most seasoned performer. But she had rehearsed it over and over, sometimes until her fingers ached, until her mind felt like it was about to collapse. That effort now became her safety net. Her fingers found the keys instinctively, moving with precision, confidence, and grace. The music was alive. It's almost as if it was guiding her rather than the other way around. The audience was still quiet, captivated by the unfolding performance. She could feel their energy in the room, a silent pulse that connected them through sound. Each note she played seemed to reach into their hearts, conveying emotion without a single word. She was fully immersed, losing herself in the music, letting her emotions flow freely through her fingers. Every trill, every glissando, every delicate pause told a story. She could feel the story unfolding not only within her but around her, in the way the audience leaned forward, in the way their eyes followed every motion of her hands, even though her focus was absolute. She couldn't completely ignore the little shadow of doubt that still lingered. The memory of the sheet music falling earlier flashed in her mind. The momentary panic, the feeling of nearly losing control, reminded her how fragile even the most practiced performance could be. But she refused to let it dominate her thoughts. Instead, she used it as fuel. She remembered every late night of practice, every sacrifice, every moment she had chosen music over comfort. She reminded herself that this was more than just playing notes. It was expressing herself, showing the world who she was and what she was capable of. As the solo progressed, the passages became more challenging. Her fingers moved faster, her hands more agile, her mind alert and fluid. The music demanded everything she had, and she gave it willingly. She felt the slight resistance of the keys, the subtle differences in pressure, and adjusted instantly, never breaking the flow. Her body became one with the instrument, her breathing syncing with the rhythm, her heart beating in time with the melody. She was in control, completely and beautifully. The audience could sense it too. There was a collective intake of breath as she executed a particularly tricky section, and a small murmur of admiration rippled through the crowd. She could see the judges leaning forward, their faces showing astonishment and respect. They weren't just watching her play, they were witnessing the culmination of years of dedication and talent. Every note she hit perfectly reinforced the impression that this performance was extraordinary, that it was something rare and unforgettable. In the midst of the performance, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She remembered the early days of learning music, the struggle to master basic techniques, the frustration of mistakes and setbacks. She remembered her teacher's encouragement, the long hours spent alone with her instrument, and the small victories that had built her confidence over time. All of it had led to this moment on the big stage. She felt gratitude, pride, and a sense of accomplishment, and she let those emotions shape her playing. Each note became more expressive, more personal, more alive. Then came a particularly emotional section, where the melodies swelled and the harmonies deepened. She felt the music pull at her soul, and she poured herself into it completely. Her fingers moved delicately, yet decisively, shaping the notes to convey sadness, hope, joy, and triumph all at once. The audience felt it too. They leaned forward, some closing their eyes, others holding their breath, captivated by the depth of feeling that radiated from her performance. She could sense the connection she was forging, the invisible thread that tied her music to their hearts. The solo was reaching its climax, a series of rapid, complex passages that tested her skill, stamina, and focus. She welcomed the challenge, relishing the opportunity to demonstrate everything she had learned and practiced. Her fingers flew over the keys, every motion precise, yet imbued with emotion. She felt a surge of energy and confidence, knowing that she had already overcome the earlier mishap and was now performing with complete mastery. She had turned a near disaster into an opportunity to shine even brighter as she played. She noticed subtle reactions from the audience. Some faces were filled with awe, some with surprise, some with admiration. She saw people whispering to their neighbors, nodding in appreciation, and even tearing up at the beauty of the music. That reaction fueled her even more. She realized that this performance was no longer just about her, was about the experience she was creating for everyone listening. She was telling a story not with words, but with the universal language of music. And it was being heard, felt, and understood. Even the technical challenges didn't faze her. When she approached a particularly difficult sequence, her hands seemed to move almost automatically, guided by muscle memory and intuition. She had practiced so many times that her fingers remembered the path, even when her mind wavered. The music flowed seamlessly, transitions were smooth, and the emotional impact was stronger than she had ever imagined. The audience's energy pushed her forward, and she played with an intensity and passion that made every note matter. She could feel the end approaching. The final section where all the themes of the solo would converge in a powerful, emotional conclusion. She knew she had to maintain her focus until the very last note. There was no room for error, no room for distraction. She concentrated fully, feeling every vibration, every sound, every subtle shift in tone. The music had become a living thing, and she was both its creator and its vessel. When she reached the concluding notes, she played them with a sense of finality and grace, letting the last sound linger in the auditorium. She lifted her hands slowly, feeling the echoes of the performance reverberate in her body. The audience sat in stunned silence for a brief moment, absorbing what they had just witnessed. Then, as if on cue, the room erupted with applause, cheers, and whistles. People were on their feet, clapping enthusiastically, some even shouting words of admiration. The judges smiled, visibly impressed by the artistry, skill, and resilience she had displayed. Backstage, fellow performers and stagehands were whispering among themselves, amazed at what they had just seen. They had watched her overcome a potential disaster and deliver a performance that was not only flawless, but emotionally compelling. She felt a sense of pride and relief wash over her, knowing that she had not only survived the challenge, but had transformed it into a triumph. She had taken control of her fear, relied on her skill, and delivered a performance that would be remembered. As she walked off the stage, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her heart was still racing, her hands still tingling from the intensity of the performance. But above all, she felt a sense of accomplishment and joy. She had faced the unexpected, embraced it, and turned it into an opportunity to shine. The solo had begun with uncertainty, but she had navigated it with courage, determination, and grace. She knew this was a defining moment in her life, a performance that would stay with her forever, a memory of resilience and artistry that no one could take away. The applause from the previous section still lingered in the air, but she didn't allow herself to be distracted. She had reached the most critical part of the solo, the the section that could truly define the performance. Every note she played now needed to carry emotion, strength, and precision. She took a deep breath, feeling the keys beneath her fingers, and let her hands move with confidence and purpose. The music flowed naturally, like a river finding its course, yet she added subtle touches, slight variations in rhythm and emphasis. That made the performance uniquely hers. She felt a surge of determination. Earlier, the falling sheet music had been a shock, a moment of fear that could have ruined everything. But she had turned that panic into an opportunity, and now she knew she could handle whatever came next. The audience was completely absorbed, their attention fixed on her and the piano. She could feel the energy in the room, a mixture of awe, anticipation, and admiration. Every keystroke was met with silent appreciation. Every flourish captured their attention. She was not just performing. She was telling a story through sound, and the audience was living it with her. As the solo progressed, the music demanded more of her technical skill. Rapid passages, intricate chords, and challenging transitions tested her dexterity and concentration. She welcomed the challenge, her fingers moving with speed and grace. Every motion was deliberate, every note intentional. She was completely in control, yet completely immersed in the emotion of the music. The audience could sense it. They leaned forward, eyes wide, holding their breath during the most delicate moments, reacting subtly to every change in tempo and volume. She felt their energy, and it propelled her forward, pushing her to give even more. In this section, she allowed herself to express deeper emotions. The melody rose and fell, capturing both tension and release, sorrow and hope. She could feel the music in her chest, in her arms, in her fingertips. It was more than a performance. It was a conversation with every person in the auditorium. The emotion in her playing resonated with the audience, drawing them in, making them feel what she felt. Some faces showed surprise at the depth and intensity. Others reflected pure admiration. The music was alive, and she was its conduit. Her hands moved instinctively, guided by countless hours of practice and a deep connection to the instrument. She navigated the most challenging sections flawlessly, her fingers flying over the keys, yet always maintaining control and grace. The audience reacted subtly, some leaning forward, some closing their eyes, as if trying to absorb every note. She could see the judges' expressions, a mixture of amazement and respect. They had seen many performances, but this one was different. It was not only technically impressive, but emotionally compelling. She knew she was creating something that would be remembered. A sudden shift in the music required her to change dynamics and tempo instantly. She welcomed the challenge. Her mind and body moved in perfect harmony, her hands responding to her intuition as much as to memory. She felt an incredible sense of focus, a clarity that allowed her to anticipate every note and transition. Even the small mistakes that could have happened were smoothed over by her skill and instinct. She had learned to adapt, to improvise when necessary, and to turn potential errors into creative opportunities. This moment was a testament to that ability. The audience was completely captivated now. Their silence was not merely quietness, but a collective holding of breath, a shared focus on every note she played. They were experiencing something extraordinary, witnessing not only her technical prowess, but also her courage and composure under pressure. She felt a deep connection with them, an understanding that the music was no longer just hers, but theirs as well. Every note she played carried emotion. Every emotion was reflected back by the audience. In the middle of this section, she faced another subtle challenge. A part of the solo that required delicate timing and perfect rhythm approached. Her fingers hesitated for a split second, but she immediately adjusted, relying on her memory and intuition. The music flowed seamlessly, the transitions smooth and expressive. The audience sensed nothing of the minor internal struggle, only the beauty and precision of the performance. She realized that these challenges, rather than frightening her, were opportunities to demonstrate resilience and skill. They made the performance alive, dynamic, and human. She allowed herself to smile faintly as she continued, aware of the connection growing between herself and the listeners. The music had become a living dialogue, each note a word, each phrase a sentence. The audience responded with subtle movements, nods, and expressions, all reflecting the impact of her performance. She felt exhilaration and joy, a profound satisfaction that came from knowing she was sharing something meaningful. This was the power of music, and she was experiencing it fully. As the solo neared its final passages, the intensity increased. The music demanded speed, precision, and emotional depth simultaneously. She welcomed the challenge, letting the adrenaline heighten her senses. Her fingers moved faster, yet every note was clear, every chord resonant. She felt a sense of triumph, having already overcome earlier obstacles, and now performing with complete mastery. She knew the audience was captivated, that every person in the room was witnessing something special. The music had become an extension of herself, a reflection of her dedication, talent, and courage. The audience began to respond more audibly. Subtle claps and murmurs of admiration spreading through the auditorium. They were drawn into the performance, experiencing the highs and lows, the tension and release, the emotional journey she was presenting. She felt their energy like a current running through her, lifting her, pushing her to give everything she had. She played with intensity, passion, and control, shaping the music with her own interpretation and emotion. It was a collaboration, unspoken, yet profound. Between performer and listener, she reached the penultimate section, a series of rapid, intricate passages that tested every skill she had. Her fingers moved almost automatically, guided by memory, intuition, and emotion. She had practiced these moments countless times, yet now they felt more alive, more expressive, more connected to her feelings. The audience sensed the climax approaching, their anticipation palpable. She felt exhilaration, focus, and confidence all at once, fully immersed in the music, fully alive in the moment. As she approached the final notes, the music demanded a delicate balance of strength and subtlety. She played with intention, letting each chord resonate fully, each phrase complete, each emotion expressed. The audience was spellbound, fully absorbed in the performance. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing she had taken a challenging solo and transformed it into something extraordinary. She had turned fear into opportunity, uncertainty into mastery, and her performance was a testament to resilience, talent, and human spirit. Finally, she reached the last chord. She let it linger, allowing the sound to fill the auditorium completely before lifting her hands. Silence fell for a heartbeat, then the room erupted in applause. Standing ovation, cheers, whistles, and claps filled the space. The judges smiled, visibly impressed, some even giving a nod of deep respect. Fellow performers backstage whispered their amazement. She had not only played flawlessly, but had transformed a challenging moment into an unforgettable performance. The solo had become a story of courage, artistry, and connection, and everyone in the room had experienced it with her. The applause that had erupted at the end of the last section still echoed in her ears, filling her with a mixture of exhilaration and nervous energy. She knew the final part of the solo was approaching, the segment that would truly define her performance. Every note needed to carry weight, precision, and emotion. She took a deep breath, feeling the piano keys beneath her fingers, and allowed her body to relax while her mind focused entirely on the music. The stage lights glimmered. The auditorium seemed to hold its breath, and for a moment, the world outside the performance ceased to exist. She began the final section with soft, deliberate notes, each one carefully placed, each one telling a part of the story she had been sharing through the music. Her fingers moved effortlessly, guided by memory and intuition, but her heart was fully engaged. She remembered all the hours of practice, the countless repetitions, the late nights spent perfecting small details, and she let that preparation fuel her confidence. Every mistake she had feared in the past was gone, placed by the certainty that she could rise to any challenge. As the music unfolded, she allowed herself to express deeper emotions. The melodies soared and fell, capturing the full spectrum of feeling: anticipation, tension, hope, and triumph. She could feel the resonance of each note in her chest, in her arms, and in her fingertips. The audience was completely absorbed, some leaning forward, some closing their eyes, others holding their breath, completely lost in the music. She felt their energy, their silent engagement, and it pushed her to give even more. This was no longer just a performance. It was a shared experience between her and every listener in the room. The technical passages that followed were demanding, rapid sequences of notes requiring dexterity and precision. Her fingers moved with confidence, guided by years of training and countless rehearsals. She had faced challenges before, moments when she doubted herself, and each time she had learned to adapt, to rely on instinct and preparation. Now, in the final section of the solo, that experience came together perfectly. She played with a combination of skill, emotion, and intuition that made every note shine. She could sense the audience reacting, even if subtly. Their breathing, their small movements, the intensity in their eyes, they were completely absorbed. She was no longer just playing for herself. She was communicating, connecting, sharing the story that had lived in her heart for years. She allowed herself to feel joy, pride, and exhilaration as the music flowed through her. The performance was alive, dynamic, and emotional. She was fully immersed, and the audience could feel it in every note. A particularly challenging passage approached. A section she had practiced countless times, but that required perfect timing and emotional control. She welcomed the challenge. Her mind and hands moved in perfect harmony, each note landing precisely as intended. She allowed herself to add subtle variations, little flourishes that reflected her personal interpretation, enhancing the music without losing its integrity. The audience responded, their engagement growing, their admiration evident in their expressions. Even the judges, who had seen many performances, were leaning forward, clearly impressed by her skill, confidence, and emotional depth. She felt a rush of exhilaration as she navigated the intricate passages, each one flowing seamlessly into the next. The earlier panic of losing her sheet music seemed like a distant memory. She had overcome that challenge, proving to herself that preparation, resilience, and courage could carry her through even the most unexpected moments. Now, she played not just with skill, but with freedom and joy. Each note was intentional, each chord meaningful, each phrase expressive. The emotional intensity of the music built as she moved toward the final crescendo. Her hands flew over the keys with precision and grace, and her heart raced with the excitement of the moment. The audience was completely captivated, their silent anticipation palpable. She could feel their admiration, their awe, and their connection to the music she was creating. Every sound, every subtle nuance, was a bridge between herself and the listeners. She realized that this performance was more than a solo. It was a dialogue, an unspoken conversation. Conveyed through melody and harmony, she allowed herself a moment of reflection as she approached the final notes. She remembered the early days of her training, the struggles to master basic techniques, the countless mistakes that had taught her patience and persistence. She thought of the encouragement she had received from teachers, friends, and family, and the sacrifices she had made to reach this stage. All of it had led to this moment, and she let those memories fuel her final performance. Her fingers moved with confidence and passion, her heart fully engaged, her mind completely focused. The climax of the solo approached, a series of rapid, intricate notes that required both technical skill and emotional expression. She played with determination, grace, and intensity, letting every note reflect her journey, her dedication, and her love for music. The audience was visibly moved, some leaning forward, some closing their eyes, some holding their breath, completely absorbed in the story she was telling through sound. She felt their energy, their connection, and it pushed her to give even more. She was performing not just for herself, but for every listener, sharing something deeply personal yet universal as she reached the final passage. The music demanded a delicate balance of strength, precision, and subtlety. She played with intention, letting each chord resonate fully, each phrase complete, each emotion expressed. The audience was spellbound, their attention unwavering. She felt a profound sense of accomplishment, knowing she had taken every challenge, every moment of doubt, and transformed it into a performance that was flawless, expressive, and unforgettable. She had turned fear into opportunity, uncertainty into triumph, and her music had become a testament to resilience, skill, and the human spirit. The final notes rang out, lingering in the auditorium as she lifted her hands slowly from the keys. Silence fell for a heartbeat as the audience absorbed the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Then the room erupted with applause, cheers, whistles, and standing ovations. The judges smiled, visibly impressed, some even giving a nod of deep respect. Fellow performers backstage whispered in awe, amazed by how she had navigated the challenges and delivered a performance that was both technically brilliant and emotionally powerful. She felt a mixture of exhaustion, exhilaration, and pure joy. Her heart was racing, her hands tingling, and yet there was a sense of peace, of fulfillment. She had faced the unexpected, embraced it, and transformed it into an unforgettable performance. The solo that had begun with uncertainty and panic had become a story of triumph, courage, and artistry. She knew this moment would stay with her forever, a reminder of her ability to rise above fear, to trust herself, and to share her passion with the world as she walked off the stage. The applause still echoing, she felt a deep sense of connection with the audience. With the music and with herself, she had not only performed a solo, she had shared a piece of her soul. The experience was transformative, a defining moment that would shape her future performances and her confidence as a musician. The audience would remember this performance, but she would carry it with her always, a testament to her dedication, talent, and unwavering spirit. The solo was gone. The last notes faded. But the impact lingered in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it, and in her own heart as well.